Okay, everybody. Welcome to the Brilliance and Commerce House of Freedom International Natural Law Trust webinar once a month. And welcome. This is November 20th, 2019, and this will be the last of the year. We'll take a holiday break. We wanted to share with you for those of you who are new, Brilliance and Commerce is a member of the Worldwide Charter for Fair International Commerce. We're a signatory on that, and there's the certificate, and on the website you can see more information about it. And so we're a project of La Vérité, which means the truth in French, and this is the House of Freedom International Law Trust Day. Liberty Debt Elimination System is available, and affiliations and special offers with a number of other wealth building systems. Today being November 20th, 2019, we also have our next webinar is scheduled for January 22nd, 2020. So put that on your calendar. And in December, be sure to have a wonderful, nice, warm family vacation with your close friends and family. Our website for past webinars is www.brilliance-videos.com. And hopefully, if our recording goes well today, this webinar today will be posted there in a couple of days. For those who have not already subscribed to our newsletter, we invite you to do so at house-of-freedom-trust.com and click on newsletter sign up. For those who need a phone number, we are available at 360-200-7521. My name is Tansen Fairman. I'm the founder and Board of Advisors of Monaco Management Group member, speaker of various radio shows, and so on and so forth. You've seen this before if you've seen any of our webinars. Nice to see you today and hear from you today. If you have questions, be sure to put it into chat, or when we open it up to questions and answers, you're welcome to raise your hand by clicking on the raise hand symbol if you're doing this by computer video, or if you're doing it by telephone, press *9. So those who will have questions during the webinar are welcome to ask them when we open it up to that. In the meantime, put questions into chat if you are on the keyboard or on a device with video. The Natural Law Trust is basically a common law trust that is a little better, because we found a lot of common law trusts out there that are inferior, that have gotten our people in trouble. And so far, knock on wood, we have had a very good fortune with our clients staying out of trouble, steering clear of trouble. We don't believe in trouble. So as the Vedic saying says, avert the danger that has not yet come. So thanks to all of you, and thanks to all of the wonderful people who have joined our trust family over the years, and to divine providence, we have been able to stay out of any problems with these trusts. They so far have a 100% success rate, meaning never been invalidated, never been penetrated. No one's ever lost any assets due to the structure or the operation of the trust. So that's a good thing. Randall Hilner, our illustrious speaker today, is the director of our trust department, founder of House of Freedom Trust, founder of White Light Unlimited, trustee of One People's Public Trust, and creator of the International Natural Law Trust. Today's topic, we're going to go into more details on the indenture and the trust abstract. Now, last month, ladies and gentlemen, if you were present on our webinar, you may have noticed that we had a glitch. There was a technical problem with Apple having upgraded to a new operating system, which turned off our screen sharing, and we didn't get that solved until the middle of the show, and then we discovered no recording was made. And so there was no recording posted. But today, all of that is fixed. We believe there should go smoothly, and we are recording, so it should be posted as usual. So, Randall, without further ado, I'm going to unmute you and ask you to turn on your video, and we will proceed with the first slide, which is a recap of the indenture. Aloha.
Well, good afternoon or evening or wherever you are. This is Randall broadcasting live from the
You're,
beautiful
you're
island of
looking
Kauai.
good. You're looking good and sounding good.
Wow, not bad for an old guy. And if I seem to squint a little bit, you have to pardon. I just had cataract surgery, and so one eye is a little bit weaker than the other one at the moment. So we'll just go from there, and I'll do what I can to make it all happen. So who, what, and where, sections 1 through 4. This is where you present the basic information of who you are, who's doing it, the name of the trust, address, and so on, where it's going to take place, where it's going to be based, whether it's a state or whether it's out of the country. We operate in, we have clients in almost every continent where the right of contract is a right of contract. It's a human nature, a natural right to be able to contract on your word, handshake, on paper, and it's the U.S. is one of those places where it's really sacred. The art of contract is very sacred. In fact, when we touch on one section, somebody have to address this because one of our clients wrote in and she was looking for, forgive me here. Oh, that's in the next section. So we'll just basically the 1 through 4 is who, what, when, and where, and that gives us the beginning. And for all of those of you, I emphasize again because I have 2 friends who have come to help me for a bit, and they've been hounding me with questions all week long, and so I invited them to come and sit. And when I do this presentation now, but it's been raining all week, and so they said, we're out of here. Sun's out. We're gone. We'll catch up later. So hopefully now we this is going to be recorded, and this is going to be a recap. So that's a beginning. So next slide would be great. Okay, so 5 and 6, this is where the meat of the matter happens. This is the beginning of the nature of the trust, what it is, what it's going to represent, and the intent of the grantor. Now we'll get into grantor, settlor, those issues in a little bit, but basically section 5 and 6 are basically state, okay, this is what this trust is all about, and the intent is what we want to do, and basically the intent of the trust that we write for you, and the one that you have in your hands, and hopefully you've read 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 times would be really good if you would read through the trust document 4 or 5 times, so that when you send questions to me, which is perfectly acceptable, I really welcome good questions. But I would ask you before you send a question to make sure that you've gone into the document and you have read a particular section that may provide a key to that answer, so that we don't just go around like what's it called, squirrel on a treadmill, I guess. So that's 5 and 6. And it's pretty clear in each one. And I think that the address, 5. So one of my clients wrote and said, well, where does the law of trust come from? And it's based on the right of contract, which is in the Constitution. So the right of contract is in the Constitution, and they classify it as an unalienable right. And I believe it's section 10, where the government shall not disallow the right of contract. So this Constitution established the fact that your ability to contract, whether it's, again, a handshake or a paper document, is your right, your unalienable right. Now, that's what the nature of the trust and that section, those two sections, would make it clear. And if you read that a couple of times, maybe 5 times, you'll be understanding a lot of what we get into along the way. And so we'll cover it again, and the nature of the trust and the intent of the trust will come up in other sections, and it'll clarify more significantly how we operate and what we do to keep it safe. In other words, yes, we haven't had any glitches with anybody, and the only time that there's any glitches in the past, what happens is that the client or the person that obtains the trust from us, they don't read the trust, and they don't really follow the directions that are given them. There's a trust manual, there's further reading, there's a bibliography that comes with it. And so I urge you to make sure you take it upon yourself to, over and over again, is to review this incredible contract that you have in your hands. It's very significant. And I've worked for 35 years. I've had, my mentor in the beginning had over 50 years writing trusts in the Sacramento area of California. And he took me under a wing, and he hit me over the head a number of times with the books and said, "Have you read this?" "Oh, yeah, sort of." And he said, "Well, what does it mean?" And I would mumble something, throw the book at me and say, "Read it again. Come on, man, let's go. Step up, step up. If you're going to really do this, you want to do that." And so my confidence level just kept rising. And we, along with another associate, refined the trust document. And then when I first came to Kauai in the 90s, I reached out and I said, "Okay, all of you people that have questions," and this was just when internet was starting and I actually had to do dial-up. I said, "Okay, all of you guys that have some trust and you have questions, if they're not from me, please send me the document and I will go through it and correct anything that might stop you from really having full range of this document." So that's what happened over the last almost 30 years here on Kauai, and of course coming to the mainland occasionally to upgrade my own process, and here we are. So we have a significant document that has been fully churned, as we say. It's been churned and used and been available for the last 30 years. Hey, so there it is. So next section, next slide, please. Okay, so we talked about this a little bit in depth last time because we had the whole hour for the trust indenture, and we have to cover not only the indenture but the abstract today. So that section 7 to 13 would cover all the duties and responsibilities of the trustee, what they can do, what they can't do, how they have to coordinate with each other. Typically, there's 2 trustees, co-trustees, we'd call it. I've had occasions where the person wants to be the sole trustee and he's not a beneficiary at all, and that's allowable, but you also need to have the banks now. We didn't before. When we first started, you could walk into a bank and just with the parts of the trust, you could open an account and you only needed 1 trustee. And now we find that the banks today, because of what's going on in the banking world and yada, yada, that the banks will mostly require at least a trustee signature, and then they need to know who the successor trustee would be, because they don't want to take on the responsibility of being the trustee for an account that you're working through, but they don't want to have the responsibility. They want you to have somebody else to step in case something happens to you. And the duties and responsibilities are significant. And I'm not going to go through them all today. I would urge you that if you have a trust indenture, that you read it again, see what's happening. And there's a significant list. Authorities, responsibilities, trustee powers. There's a whole, it's almost like, I think we covered it before, but there's a whole section on what the powers are, what the responsibilities are, what the trustees need to do to maintain the integrity of the trust document. So even though, like, the trust indenture is the meat of the matter, but and that's the static process, and the dynamic matter is how the trustees perform and how you, either as a manager or a trustee, take responsibility and do the appropriate process for the whole trust. Now, once you have a bank account and you're in operation, that the trust can basically do anything any human being is allowed to do. Any kind of contract, any kind of investing, any kind of building of assets, any kind of divesting of assets. And that's one of the things that trustees must participate in is, if there is an asset in the trust that's not growing and needs to be divested, then trustees need to look at that and make appropriate action to divest the trust of that, what you say, drag in the anchor. If you drag in the anchor, then, cut it loose and let it go. So there's a whole section, and I encourage you to read that fully if you have the document. If you don't have the document, then make sure that you connect up with House of Freedom Trust with Tanzan and the group, and at least get something started. Say, I need to ask these questions, and can I at least get a trust manual? And accordingly, we would probably do that if you step up and offer, participation in the program. And that, as we get into it, we're going to go into the abstract, and that abstract is available on once you place your first payment down, $250 payment. Once you do that, then you will, if nothing else, get the abstract. Well, first of all, you're going to have to fill out the form so that I have all the information that you need to have so that we can write the trust document. And then we go from there. And then once that happens, you have access to my email. And once you get the abstract, then you can, if you can't figure it out, if we don't work it out on an email and you need to talk to me, then we do that pretty easily. I'm freed up pretty much right now. I can't, because of my surgery, I can't go in the water and go surfing. So I'm more around than I used to be. And if we get busy, then sometimes I'm not necessarily available. But that's that whole middle section of the indenture, and it's quite clear in the indenture. And I urge you, you're the one that has to take responsibility to make sure you understand that. And if you start, and I'm more than willing to fill in any gaps that you might have. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so the section 14 and 17 are basically the end, and that would be like protectors agreement, the management, operating expenses, how to carry that forward. I mean, it's like any business. When you have a business, you need a front office. You need to offer the product or whatever you're doing, and you need to have a back office where you have a books. You have your books, and so you have to keep books. Just like in any business, the trust needs to keep track of its expenses, etc. And duration, how long is it going to do? The reason we choose 21 years is that it's kind of been the way of law that trust law is at least 21 years. My mentor said it's 21 years plus lives in being. So if you're a parent and you have children and you have grandchildren, then this trust can operate through that period of time. So it can go 21 years plus lives in being. And then the trustees, during that time, you may often have different trustees, new trustees, etc. That can continue on at the end of that period. Then the trustees and all the beneficiaries would get together and say, okay, this has reached its limit that's useful. Do we want to reignite it, or do we want to separate out into multiple trusts for all the beneficiaries, or do we just want to end it? Some people just say, okay, we don't want to play this game anymore, and so we're going to give all the beneficiaries a pro rata payout, and then you're okay, now beneficiary or grandchild, you're on your own to go back and talk with Randall if he's still around. He might be in surf heaven by then, but we'll just figure that we're going to be here for a while longer and go from there. And so that's the guidelines of operation. And if you go have our trust and you go, please, again, 3 or 4 times, just read that, so that the whole idea of us, Johnson and I, presenting this is that if you're going to work with this, that you really have to you don't have to be technical and you don't have to understand it like I do, but you do need to get the gist of how the trust operates so that you can have free play and you know how to make it work. And then you go about, rather than your business, it's going to be the business of the trust. There's the gist of that first part. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so 18 and 19 are the beneficiary rights. You have, the trust has 100 units to give out, and there's no more or less. And that is percentage-wise, it's just broken up into the number of beneficiaries. If there's one beneficiary, then they're going to get 100% of the beneficial units. And so they would have all the rights of assets paid out by the trustees and the trust. Now, this is a private irrevocable trust, but it's also a discretionary trust. And the discretionary trust means that the trustees have a discretion as to whether to pay the beneficiaries now in present time or to hold back and pay later. And one of the clauses in Section 18 is that it's called the scare clause, I call it, and it's the spendthrift clause. And what happens is you might have a beneficiary, there might be a beneficiary that is frivolous in nature, and they go beyond their means, and they maybe rack up a set of bills that really is beyond the nature of what they deserve from the trust. And what that clause does is it gives the beneficiaries, the trustees can call back the units of beneficial interest from that person, that frivolous person. And so they take it in and they may hold it for a period of time until either the beneficiary straightens his life out, or the trustees have decided that there needs to be another beneficiary and it's distributed from there. And that's and in that, beneficiary can't he can't take his beneficial interest and take it to a mortgage company and put a lien, borrow money and put a lien on it. That's can't do that. So the trustees would see that right away, and they can refuse to pay the mortgage on that thing, and then so the beneficiary would have to deal with that before he gets the trust in the assets of the trust in future jeopardy. So that's the whole idea, is that the assets in the trust, somebody's going to put assets in the beginning, whether it's paper, gold, or silver. And we're going to talk about the different things that you can put in the trust, but that's what that does. That protects the trust from neglectful or frivolous beneficiaries and keeps the trust intact. So that's that. And then the next section, 19, is the standard of distribution. And so basically, if there's more than one beneficiary, the trustees give it out in the percentage that the client wants it to go. So you may have 3 beneficiaries, and 2 of the beneficiaries get 75%, and then the one beneficiary just gets the remaining 25%. So it just depends on how you coming to me as a client, you would have to decide how much benefit goes to certain people. And what that's set in paper, that needs to happen in the beginning, and that is very flexible. It can be changed. You and the trustees can change that at any time for whatever purpose, and everybody just needs to be in agreement. And the reason, and with 2 trustees, if it needs to be a unanimous decision to make it okay to make this distribution happen. If there's 3 trustees, then it just needs to be a majority. So right now I'm setting up, with my friends that are here, we're setting up a trust where there's 3 of us as trustees. And so that takes, because I'm here, one of them's in California, and one of them's on the East Coast, we do this all under email, and we just need a majority for 2 of us to say, yeah, let's go ahead and do this. And the other one can say no, but typically when you're working with people that I mean, and we're going to get into nominee, grantor, and nominee trustees, co-trustees. We'll get into that in a little bit. But the idea is that it's the protection of the asset in the trust that is the most important aspect of what we're doing here. And the rest is how to operate. And operating, if you're any kind of astute business person, you will know how to operate your business. And so people come to me and they have, well, I want to take my business and have it in trust. And I say, okay, you can do it 2 ways. You can have the business be absorbed. You can assign the business to the trust, or some people have LLCs, or I don't encourage it, but sometimes they already have it, and it's more work to close the LLC and then put the business in trust. So I just say, okay, this is what you do. You make the trust a member, and the percentage of membership is totally up to you. And that's what we're discussing with my friends that have come from the mainland. They say, well, what percentage do I do that? And I say, it's really your choice. You're the grantor, or you have a nominee grantor. You need to decide what the initial agreement is. Then once that's done and it's on paper, it can all be changed. But in the beginning, it needs to be clear just who is the beneficiary and how much they get to have coming in their direction. And once you understand, it's simple. And that's why I just say, please read the indenture until you really understand it. And if you have questions, if you have the indenture and you're a client of ours, please don't hesitate to get my email. You should have it if you're a client, and say, hey, I can't understand this. And we do it a little bit, maybe a couple of emails, and they say, I still can't get it. So we would have a chat, and invariably it's just cleaned right up and goes from there. The trust has got a section in it called Section 20. I think that might be another slide. All right, this is third parties. This is trust has a section in it, Section 20, and in the trust it says that this trust can give to any charitable endeavor that it sees fit to, so you can support any charity you want, and that it's a clean break from the trust to a charitable party. And then also working with third parties, you have to remember that the trust is going to go into contract with a third party. This gentleman is has a major product that's distributed all over the US. And I say, okay, you have to understand that you're taking this trust and you're providing the background to distribute your product. And now when you distribute your product and there's issues, it's the trust that has to clear it up. And then you consult with the other two trustees, and you would have to make sure that the contract that you sign with the third party is clean. One of the issues or things in the trust, the dynamic of the trust, is that the trust can sue, but it also can be sued. So it's one of the reasons that I encourage everybody never to put a vehicle in the trust. This is one example, because the vehicle can create a liability. And if vehicle is in that trust, or a boat or a plane, then the assets of the trust are open to suit. And the same with, so I encourage everybody to not put a vehicle in a trust unless you happen to have $1 million Ferrari, in which case you would put it in its own trust, so the liability would stay away from the assets in the main trust, and then it can go from there. We had a number of clients who have spun out of control, and fortunately, because it wasn't in trust, it didn't affect the assets within the trust document or within the trust portfolio. Third parties, confidentiality. When you're a trustee, you sign a confidentiality statement. It's just like signing in some projects you go into. You have to sign a non-disclosure agreement, and that's basically the same thing as when you're a trustee. You do not talk about any trust business in front of public. That's I think we're finding in Washington, D.C. that get you into trouble. So that's the summary. And notice, always give notice if anything's happening. And understand that this section of the trust is the static part of it, and it allows you to do the things that you feel are appropriate for the assets in the trust, investing, divesting, and all of that. So it's a static part of the trust, but in a sense, it gives you the ability to then, for the trustees, to go into a dynamic portfolio. Okay, we're on to basically the next part, which is the abstract. Okay. Okay, so the first thing we have in the abstract is a synopsis of the trust. So it's like taking certain sections of the trust, and we condense it down into, it's 2 pages long. And so that gives anybody that looks, like when you go to the bank, one of my friends that's here, he only took the abstract to the trust of the trust to the bank, and they opened up an account for him, and they just needed his trustee signature. So at that particular bank, he had a relationship with the banker, and they knew who he was, and they said, okay, we take this on, we understand. And at some point they may say, we would like a copy of the indenture. On one of the accounts I just opened, all I did was walk into the bank with my other trustee, Marissa, and I had a copy of the indenture and I had a copy of the abstract. And I said, here's the whole trust document. He just thumbed through it. He liked what he saw. He said, just give me the copy. So I gave him the indenture and I gave him the abstract. We signed, and the bank account was up and running right away. We just deposited a certain sum of money. Typically, the banks want, if you have more than $100 to open the account, then they won't charge you interest on a trust account or any checking account. So the cost of doing business has gone down a little bit in the sense that banks don't charge you for checking. It's basically free checking anymore. They know they can't run that scheme. So that's what they do. So that's, the memorandum is a synopsis. And in it gives a rundown and where it is and when and how and all of that. And then intent and purpose and what the trustees can do. So that would be the memorandum. And the next slide. Well, actually, that's the memorandum. I have a trust indenture minute, and then I also have a memorandum, and they basically are the same thing. So it's a synopsis of the whole indenture and what's in the beginning, and then I go into the memorandum covers all the duties. It has a list of all the duties and responsibilities of the trustee, and the trustees, of course, would sign that, and that's part of the abstract. You would list, by then you would probably, hopefully you'd have an EIN number, and when you get an EIN number, if you're on the mainland, you can just go online, and it takes about 10 minutes, and you fill in the blanks. That's an SS4 form, and you'd have to supply the name, the trustee's name, the address, who's the responsible party. They would give their social security number so that you can go and get an EIN number online. If you don't live in the country and you're using a US address, I have a lot of people that do that, people in Canada, or we're rewriting for a client in Mexico, and we're going to use a US address. So we would get a non-grantor trust number, and that has to be faxed to the IRS, but that usually within 2 weeks you have a written response to that fax. And so that's how you would start to list. And then so on the abstract is where you would put your EIN number so that you can walk in and the bank would be happy with it. And then we have an executive manager's agreement, and some people who are, we haven't got to resolution yet, but the executive meaning, if you are the grantor, I don't think we have a slide tons, and sorry, you can go on the next slide and I'll just slip in between. So executive management, if you're not the grantor and you are a trustee, then you wouldn't need a manager's agreement. But I include that open blank agreement because when the trust is going to take on a project maybe, and it needs to have, it's too busy to manage that project, but it has maybe a couple of projects, and you can use this agreement minute to appoint a manager for that particular project, and they would be responsible to the trustees. So that's a simple arrangement of management agreement to take care of this particular thing and the guideline of how to make that all happen. Let's see, we got slide next up. So we have a banking resolution in it, and that is filled in, and you have the name of the trust, the EIN number, and then there's a place on it where you're going to leave it blank until you go to open the account. And then when you get to the bank, you would fill in the bank name and the branch office name. And then you would leave that. You would have the trustees, who they are, and it would be a signed page where you would leave that with the bank, and they would want to have that in their records. So it would go into their banking records with the abstract. And so that would be left open, and then you would designate which bank and how you want to do it, because you may take this document to more than one bank. Here on Hawaii, I have what I need, but on the mainland, you might have an account with Wells Fargo, and you might have an account with HSBC or whatever, maybe your local bank, whatever. And so you leave that available so that they can have that. Then you have the trust certification. I don't know if that's a slide. Did we put that in, Tanzan? Maybe next slide. Oh, okay. So I mixed up. I've been mixed up. I've been able to see very well lately, folks, so please forgive me. The manager's agreement we covered, and then you have a trust certification. Do we have that slide? There it is. So what this does is when you go into the bank, this trust certification, it's 2 pages long, and the trustees authenticate. They say, this is real. This has all been resolved, and this is the certificate that gives us the authority to run the trust as trustees, and that the trustees verify that it is an authentic contract. Okay, so that's the trust certification minute. It's really clear, and it's signed by the trust. If it's like I can see that this is one that Marissa signed. So she signed as the settlor. So the bank knows that she's a settlor, and she's certifying that she's signed it. And the trustee has signed it as trustee. So it gives the bank the clue. It gives the bank a real piece of paper that says, oh, this is real. Okay, so we're going to go ahead with this. Resolution minute. Oh, this is how old this trust is. Oh boy. Okay, and then so we're going to I think we go to the minutes. No, that's the manager's agreement we covered. That's the trust certification. Oh, okay. So this in the trust document, and we didn't go over this because it's not part of the indenture. It's in the middle section of the trust. You have all the appointments and assignments and appointments of who's going to be the trustee, who the settlor is, and what Schedule A is for personal property that you already hold. Okay, so you'll have, this does not include currencies or foreign currencies. I mean, some people have a bundle of money in their own personal account, and rather than having it stay in their personal account, they may want to assign that currency to the trust. They may have $100,000 floating around and it's in their name and they don't want that. So they assign it to the trust. And that would be any valuable property, gold, stocks, businesses, bonds, art, etc. So that would go into Schedule A as personal property. And that is not, Tanzan and I had a little miscommunication. That is not Addendum A, that is Schedule A. We'll get to Addendum A in a minute here, but so Schedule A is personal property, and then Schedule B is for real estate. If you have a house and you're deciding to put the house in trust, which we've done numerous times, is that you assign it to the trust and the trustees, then you have to take it, the trustees take it, and you have to go to the county and re-record the property deed from your name to the name of the trust, and that's recorded with the county, wherever you are. I think in Canada, there's a different kind of office you go to, and every country is a little bit different. Since I mostly operate here, even though we have clients all over the world, in a sense, you still have to, if you have property, you have to record it somewhere. Whoever typically carries the deed wherever you are, that's where you go to record it. So Schedule A is for personal property, anything that you have of value, jewelry, et cetera, et cetera. And then real estate would go into Schedule B. And then what's your next slide, Mr. Tanzan? Oh, okay. So I'll just say we can go back one, but basically, then we have Addendum A. And now that is where you're going to assign any foreign currency. Some of you may not have any foreign currency, and some of you are waiting for the big bang on the foreign currency. So we'll just leave it there, but that's Addendum A, and that at this time is not taken to the bank. Please do not. They'll think you're crazy, and they will probably may even say, we don't want your business. So be really diligent. It's not, this Schedule Addendum A is notarized. Also, you want to have it notarized. You want to have a date stamp. So when the Big Bang does indeed happen, that you don't have it in your pocket. It's in the pocket of the trust, and it's like a safekeeping receipt. You have placed it out of personal liability and put it into the trust, which can hold that asset without incurring a liability, as long as you and the trustees keep the trust running clean. And so that's Schedule A, B, C, D, E, F, and on to, I think, just questions. Now would be the time.
Okay, everybody. So press *9 if you're on the telephone, or press the raise hand button if you're on video on the computer, or if you have access to a keyboard, type into chat. We do have a comment here from JB, thank you. Article 1, Section 10, Clause 1 is the right of contract.
Yeah, okay. All right.
Yeah, that's the Constitution.
Right. Thank you, Jabba.
All right. And Judy, you've raised your hand. You are unmuted. Would you like to ask your question?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. Hi there. I'm living in Australia. I guess I have a couple of questions. My first question is apologies. I know this has been covered, but I'm having a few internet challenges at the moment where I'm living. Could you please remind me what buying a trust for $250 entitles people to do? I have a few friends that are asking.
Okay, so you're asking what the $250, which would get the abstract and allow you to begin the documents. Is that your question? What
Yes,
would you?
correct.
Okay.
Correct.
First, Judy, please be aware that's per month for 10 months.
Okay, great. Excellent.
Yeah. And so then that $250 a month, you'd be working your way into at the end of that 10-month, or if you decide to pay it off sooner, we give you the full, it's basically 35 to 40 pages, depending on different information, et cetera. But that would earn your way into having a complete document. The abstract gets you going. It also date stamps. If you do have any foreign currency, it does date stamp it. And with some banks, you literally can open the account. I have my two friends that are here. He went in, he's in Pennsylvania, and he walked in with the abstract and they opened up an account for him, and he was operating that next day.
So you get the abstract for the first payment of $250?
Yes,
I have the manual and I have the trust document.
Do you have the abstract already?
Not sure about the abstract. I definitely have the manual.
Okay.
And yeah.
And have you
I've been emailing.
Have you filled out the form and got me information?
No, I'm still choosing a name. I have an existing trust set up in America, so I don't exactly know what type of trust it is. So I've been to an Australian bank and I've asked them, what do I need to set up a trust account? And they told me that I need to have all of the beneficiaries come in and sign. And I said, look, I'm sorry, some of them aren't born yet.
Right.
So I have an Australian ABN number, and I'm going to try again. We're a bit different to you guys. We have 4 main banks and probably 3 just minor banks. So I'll go around the lot, but I just wanted my ducks in a row before I went off again. I just thought it was important to get an account, as I'm a crypto trader. So I want my trading funds in a trust and not in my personal name. And so I'm just getting really organized. I could use this existing trust, but I don't want to do that in case it's illegal. It's from a failed investment in the USA.
Okay. So I'd have to look at that document to pass any kind of value on it. And you don't, if you want to trade, then you at some point need to say, okay, I'm going to choose a name and I'm going to use, we have a nominee grantor service with a wonderful woman, Dominique. And she also has, under a different title, she has a trustee service. So like I have number of people that come to me and say, I'm by myself. I need somebody to be the grantor, and I need to have a co-trustee or something like that. And so you would need to decide on the name, and then maybe another trustee. Maybe you might want to use our grantor service, and you might want to be one of the co-trustees.
Okay. Yes.
No, I don't. You have to try enough of a bank. I've never heard of a bank that needs the beneficiaries. How can the beneficiaries get there if they don't live there or they're not born yet? So that's typical of a statutory trust. I wouldn't be surprised if that's what they're thinking of.
No, I just asked them what were the requirements when you open a trust bank account.
Oh, see, well, that's a trust bank account. It may be that they're going to set it up for you. They're thinking that you're going to let them be the whole shebang.
Ah, right.
Maybe.
Maybe they
So,
did. That's not
yeah,
what I meant.
right,
Okay. All
of
right.
course.
I'll pursue that. Now, I'm an Australian
Judy,
citizen, but
excuse
I
me,
have.
before
Sorry.
you continue, may I make a comment? I
Sure.
wish to tell everyone to please do not go and start talking to your bank about whether they will open an account for this trust before you acquire it.
Right.
Okay.
The reason
Yes.
is there are specific instructions that come with our trust for how to get your bank account opened, specific words to use, what words not to use, what pages to take to the bank from the trust. Whenever people have asked their banks in advance about opening an account for this trust, they invariably will say the wrong things and then they'll get the wrong answers.
Good
Okay.
point. Yeah.
Right. And
Thank you, Hanson.
the banker wants some kind of paperwork.
Yeah.
The banker is going to, not just want you to be there to open up an account. He's going to want to see some part of the indenture or some process that's made it real. Now, you
Mm-hmm.
said you got an ABN number. That's like is that a New Zealand or Australian number?
It's an Australian business number. I've had a business in the past.
Okay. Okay,
Would
I
that
understand.
be a good substitute for an EIN, or am I better
Well,
to get an American EIN?
if you have that number and is it assigned to you or assigned to a name? Can you tell
It's
me that?
assigned to my name.
Okay,
To
so
the,
you may have to, you decide on how you want it, who you want, and who, et cetera, and then you would probably have to go back to and get an ABN number for the trust specifically.
right. Thank you. That answers it perfectly.
Well, that should help. And then it may be that, let's say you're one of the trustees and you may have a trustee service, or you may have a friend in Australia that would be there with you. And then once you have at least the beginning paperwork, let's say that at least the abstract, and you filed and gotten a new ABN number, can you go and get an ABN number online in Australia?
Yes, yes.
Okay. So then you would get it for the trust, and the trustees would sign. It would be maybe a responsible party. I don't know how it goes. And then you would go to the bank with the abstract and say, okay, we're the two trustees here, or at least one trustee, and here's the documents, and we would like to create, an account, a checking account for this trust. It's not a trust account. It's a checking account for
Okay.
a trust.
Okay. And
And
they still have checking accounts.
yeah, and that's why Tanzan's saying, um, get your abstract at least, and then in that abstract is what pages to take to the bank and what pages to not take to the bank.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. I don't know if I should say this online. Does this go on YouTube?
What? This?
It does, doesn't it? This recording.
No, it's just Tanzan Zoom. I don't think it's on YouTube.
Okay. Oh well,
Tanzan would.
okay. Well, perhaps I better not say what I was going to say. That's
Well,
okay.
just send me an email.
Yeah.
Send an email to Tanzan, and he'll pass it on to me, and we'll make it clear.
Excellent. Thank you. That was answered perfectly. I'm so glad I asked.
Okay, Judy, thank you for asking. It's a pleasure to have really intelligent questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Judy, and enjoy your summertime there.
It is beautiful day. I'm in shorts, t-shirt.
What part of the country are you in?
Sunshine Coast, so above Brisbane.
I've enjoyed that.
Probably
area
like
when
Hawaii.
I was there.
Randall.
Yes.
It's probably very much like Hawaii, but I love Hawaii. I love the energy there. The Sunshine Coast is probably the closest to that energy in Australia.
Yes.
Very forward thinking, very crypto, very in the now, very supportive people and energy. Amazing.
Great.
I'm not from here. I've just moved.
Great. I have friends and clients down in the fireplace, and they're not happy.
Oh, in Victoria or South Australia?
Yeah,
South
she's safe,
Australia.
so it's okay.
Yeah, not nice. Not nice.
Well,
Anyway, it's part of the climatic changes, isn't it? Or energy changes that's happening.
sure is everywhere.
Exactly. Thank you. You're a great organisation. I love the way you're so organised now. I've been following you for a year and a half. Make sure you read your ditch. There's an
Thank
Aussie
you.
term for you.
Thank you, Judy. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks heaps.
Okay. All right, Abra, we have you next, and you are unmuted.
Hello. Yes, I
Hi,
have.
Barbara.
Hey there.
Yes.
So I sent you an email with this question, and I just want to follow through with that. So let me pull up that page. I turned the pages. So I have been studying trusts, and I'm particularly interested with the choice of law clause, which is what other classes and stuff I've taken talks about. The nature of trust 5.1. This trust is a separate, lawful, and legal entity formed by private contract and comprehensively defined as private, irrevocable personal trust. It is not a business trust nor any other entity of statutory nature. Its existence, validity, and authority are from the unalienable right to unalienable right to contract, as it exists in the state of Washington, protected by the 1789 Constitution of the United States of America, Article 1, Section 10, and needs no permission or franchise from the state to exist or function. I would just love it if you could expand on that choice of law, 1789 Constitution, Article 1, Section 10.
It's your right to contract. It's your unalienable right to contract.
Mm-hmm.
That's all it is. It's your the government backs, or the government cannot infringe on your right to contract. So you can contract with anybody and do anything that is not harmful or of liability nature.
Okay.
And it's not just in the Constitution, it's been confirmed in multiple Supreme Court
Right.
cases, like Hale versus Henkel.
Okay.
Right. Yeah. No, it's been around for 200-300 years now, and it's basically your right to contract any way you want, as long as it's not harmful and illegal.
Okay. So in the studying I've done in what other people would call the choice of law clause, you could use common law, you could use like some of them for commercial purposes, use commercial law, you know.
UCC, correct?
Yeah. So what would this be under? Is this under common law? Or is this a natural law trust?
It's a natural. It's not. The name you have on it is arbitrary. It's your right to contract.
Okay.
That's the basis of it. Is your right, unalienable right to contract, and it's based. It seems like you're based in Washington, so Washington is the first place that would back it, and then Washington law is backed or underwritten by the Constitution.
Mm-hmm.
And it holds your right to contract in place.
Okay.
So I don't know what you might tell me whether you're doing an online course in common law or UCC. I mean, we're working with some people that are very involved with UCC, and we use UCC in appropriate places. When I was with the One People's Public Trust, we took that UCC and we went to Europe and went to all the major banks, and we served papers on them, showing them or stating that they were undermining the right of contract. And they were, I don't want to get into the story of the feds and all of that stuff. It's not even worth the conversations. So if you want, you can send me, what courses you're studying, and I'll give it a gist, and I'll look it over, and I'll give you feedback on it. But now, Abra, do you have our abstract already?
Yep.
Okay. Do you have the full trust or just the abstract?
Full trust.
Okay. So then we've communicated on email a couple of times, and I just want to get clear whether you have a direct question more than what we just talked about now, or whether that holds for, I'd be interested in where you're studying and what you're studying.
So this one particular class was about trademark law. We did a lot of looking into trademark law and international commercial law.
Right.
The Sovereign Immunity Act, things like that.
Right.
I was just curious about what law does this one fall under? So it's natural law. Can you go somewhere and look up natural law?
No, you go to Black's Dictionary. I used to have first edition and sixth edition, which were the best, which since got flooded out. But there's nothing, you won't find anything like natural law trust. It has natural and has trust. So the law is your unalienable right to contract, and it's backed by that and the fact that Uniform Commercial Code governs everything under contract as well. The Uniform Commercial Code is what underlies all laws within the Constitution, within all of the different states.
Okay.
Abra, I think your confusing point is the word under. The trust does not derive its authority to exist from any body of law.
Oh.
Right.
That is why we use the word sovereign, but we don't want to use that with, agencies of the government and things like that.
Right.
Between us, we can understand that it's sovereign because it's not under any jurisdiction. I hope that clarifies for you.
Yes.
The only things that would come under some jurisdiction might potentially be the actions, specific actions, or specific transactions of its officers.
Right.
Okay. Okay, I understand. That makes perfect sense to me. It's basically, it's a contract, and whatever's in this contract is the law for this contract. We don't need anybody else's law.
Well, as long as it's within, you're not harming anyone,
Yeah.
and it's not an illegal process that you're doing, then you're fine.
So, okay, so in my mind, okay, so this is it's a very simple law, trust. It's meant to be that way. So it's like really clear and whatnot. And the ones that we were looking at, they're much more complex. When you need a choice of law clause, if you're doing commercial stuff and you have to you want to definitely choose, and you want to choose which body of law you're under when you're doing that kind of stuff. So that makes sense.
Okay. And, again, the basis of contract, I think it's used to be, I have it in my UCC books. It used to be UCC 1-207, and it's since changed because the UCC was refined and rewritten, and unfortunately I can't get behind my green screen because it's pinned to the wall. There's a new number for it now, but if you Google UCC 1-207, they will direct you to the new number and what that means. In other words, you hold your rights to yourself, and that's
without prejudicing. Yeah, without prejudicing.
Without prejudice. That's right. That's what it was. So that's what gives you the ability to contract.
Okay.
Or that holds, basically that stabilizes your ability to contract.
And regarding those more complicated trusts, in all our decades of experience, we have not found any benefit whatsoever to the average client by having those more complicated entities. Randall, how many pages is our trust up to now?
It goes between 34 and 38 pages, depending on
34 to 38. And some trusts, statutory trusts and so on, are 100 pages and beyond. And most of the benefit of that goes to the attorneys who set them up.
Right, of course.
Because they're so darn complicated that it requires an attorney and all the fees that he has to be paid, you know, and it doesn't really deliver any more benefit, usually a lot less benefit to the client.
It costs, you know, it takes your money out of your pocket.
Yep.
Well, this particular one wasn't a lawyer-written trust. It was, it actually originated from Understand Contract Law and You Win.
Yep. Some common law trusts are complicated unnecessarily too.
Jamie just got a little thing flagged. Jamie noted 1-308. Is that correct?
Yes.
I think that's the new one. So
thank you, Jamie, or Jaime, however you pronounce it.
And I was just curious because, you know, like I said, this particular class, it really revolved around trademarks and business and whatnot. And
copyright.
You know, instead of doing it, you can do copyright, but you can also do trademarks and all this stuff. And I just thought it was interesting that they had a choice of law clause, and it was international commercial law for this particular trust that they had chosen. And I was just curious what this trust law, you know, choice of law was.
We try to keep it simple, and the choice of law is your right to contract. And then, I mean, if you, let's say you have something that you're creating out and you want the trust to own that copyright, then you would have the trust either file the copyright or stamp it. And I think just writing it and signing it that's all you need to own the copyright for that particular document, I believe. And I'm not studying law, Aubrey, so it's up to you to search it out.
Yeah. Okay.
Again, the trust itself isn't under a body of law, but certain transactions can be voluntarily subjected. Like, for example, if you put real estate in it and record it at the county recorder, then obviously the right to the title of that real estate is governed by the local county law.
Correct. And then the only way you can escape that is a whole other dimension of allodial title, which the government has come down on. And I was doing that for a period of time, and it just got to be so complex, and most people thought that they could get allodial title, but they still had a mortgage, and you can't. It has to be free and clear. So when you have a piece of property, say, and it's not allodial title, then, you know, that any kind of the county or wherever you are can, you know, step in and regulate that process of property. And people say, well, I'll just get the trust and then I won't have to pay taxes, or I won't have to pay the mortgage. And I'm going, oh, wait. This is not what this trust does. What this trust does is protect what you have. And you can't think that just by putting your property in trust that it will not have property tax or a mortgage or not be under the scrutiny of the county of where it's recorded. So please make sure you understand that.
And Aubrey, before we move on to other questioners, you had typed a question into chat. Since when do beneficiaries sign on a trust bank account? Should it just be the trustees? Did you hear Randall's answer to that?
Well, that's what I was just responding when the other lady was talking a minute ago. So, but then it kind of got answered when, if the bank thinks that they are doing the trust, I mean, who knows what they do in Australia? You know, it's.
Well, here in the U.S., some banks are silly and crazy too.
But I wouldn't think a bank would assume that they were going to be the the trust, I don't know what you'd even call that, the trust.
Randall had a big laugh a few years ago when I told him that Chase Bank turned me down for an account, and the reason they gave was that the grantor wasn't a signatory on everything in the trust, and he had a big laugh over that.
Well,
Yeah, sometimes it's just ignorance too.
Exactly.
yes, well, typical of bankers, and I'm not going to point my finger at the bankers necessarily, or any bankers in particular, but just let it go at that, and I hope that clarifies for you.
Yep. I have one last comment for the lady in Australia. You could try more than one bank. You might don't just settle with one.
She's very aware that that's what's going to happen.
Yes. Say thank you and walk down the street to somewhere else.
Yep.
Okay. Thanks, Abra.
Thank you, Abra.
Okay, let's go back to chat. We got a couple other people that raised hands, but we also have a lot of questions in chat. We'll catch up on both. Xavier wrote, what if the bank does not accept the minutes for a change of trustee because the trust was not opened up as a business account?
It shouldn't have anything to do with that, and then you better walk and find another bank. I mean, they're trying to control what you can do, and that's not appropriate.
We've never heard of any bank turning down our change of trustee, have we? I'd never heard of that.
No, not at all. I'm particularly probably because in our time of business, most of the trusts that we've had, the trustees are pretty much the same. But I've never had an issue with that. And if, Marissa has passed, and so I have to create a new successor trustee. Excuse me.
Let the bank know, and the bank will have to accept it.
You would just, you walk in with a new document that says, okay, this trustee is passed then, or this trustee is changed. And they would typically you're going to accept it. It's never been an issue. And like I have to do that with a couple of banks here, and I'm waiting for the new trustee. I've got to get them at a good moment, and then I will go to all the banks here where the accounts are, and then I would, like the accounts I have on the mainland, I would just email them a notice of change, or if there's a different signer on the trust account, on the checking account.
So Xavier, hopefully that answers your question. We've never seen a problem with that. And sometimes banks will sign the trust up as a personal account, sometimes as a business account, doesn't really matter. Okay, Neville asks, if an existing beneficiary grants another asset into the trust, do the units need to be revised?
Yes. Anytime there's an action within the operation of the trust, it needs to create a minute. And it's the minute is signed by the trustees, either electronically. When we use Dominique as our service, she does it all by electronic. She sends it off, and it's done by this company that stamps her signature on it, and it's a validated process. And so there's more and more of that coming on where you can, I think it's a service you can subscribe to. And so you subscribe to that. And so rather than you signing all these documents, you would just email them the document itself, and they would go through and they would send you back an attachment that would have all the stamped places where you're supposed to sign.
Well, Randall, Truby has a counter to that. She says beneficiaries cannot grant anything as they are beholden to the trustees.
Yeah, the beneficiaries have no power, really. They can ask, the beneficiaries basically, they can ask for an accounting from the trustees, like on a yearly basis, but they have no more authority to do that. And that's why we have the scare clause in here, because if the beneficiaries try to circumvent what's going on with the trust, they can be basically displaced. So,
Well, she and Neville are talking about the beneficiaries granting assets into the trust.
well, why would they do that? I mean,
Right. That's my question. That's kind of unusual. We don't normally hear of that.
that's like going backwards.
Yeah.
Typically, it's the initial grantor or whoever sets up the trust would initiate the asset base, and if the beneficiaries, I mean, that's like going backwards. If the beneficiaries have assets that they want to assign, I would suggest that those beneficiaries set up their own trust and start their own improvement program, or building their assets that way. To me, beneficiary trying to put money into the trust account is counterproductive.
Okay. JB, you've had your hand up. You're unmuted. Would you like to say your question?
Yeah, hello. JB, back after a long stint, long hiatus. But I have a few questions for you. If you have quite a bit of asset or a lot of money, a lot of currency, whatever, do you have to grow the trust for the benefit of the beneficiary if you're uber wealthy?
No, that's why we talk about it being a discretionary trust. The trustees can just accumulate those assets to be given out later or to be given somewhere else.
Okay, because I thought the purpose of the trust was to grow the assets for the benefit of the beneficiary, but if you have so many assets, it would seem like you wouldn't have to do that. You don't have to fulfill that objective of the trust.
Well, if you have that many assets, they're going to grow on their own. In other words, they're going to up the value on their own. So it just in the sense that those assets are held by the trust would enhance the asset base or the value of what's in the trust.
Okay, that's good. Thanks. Also, if the banking situation implodes because of Deutsche and all these central banks, you have your funds in a trust and one of these tier 1 banks have accepted your trust, then what happens to the trust itself? In that kind of economic emergency, does the trust, do they take the assets and the trust? Can they? Or are they, must they keep your assets preserved?
I'm sorry, could you run that by me again, JB?
Sure. In a situation where you have this implosion of all these tier 1 banks, which is coming,
okay, fine.
And you've already created the trust and signed off in that particular bank, especially these horrible tier 1 banks,
Okay.
these commercial banks, which everybody should avoid. But if you've set that up in a tier 1 bank and you have this implosion and this burgeoning of this implosion, because if Deutsche Bank goes, then all the other banks are going to go, what happens to the trust? How can you preserve the assets? Or do they have to guarantee you the one-to-one return in an economic emergency? Can they take it?
You have an asset in a bank. Mm-hmm. You have some liquid asset in the bank. The bank wouldn't have control of your real estate necessarily. That would belong to a mortgage company. So you have liquid assets in a bank, and if the banks implode, if you don't haven't taken it out, if you haven't taken the asset out of that particular bank, then it would collapse with the bank.
You have a trust that you've set up with, let's say, Wells Fargo or HSBC or Chase. But all these banks collapse as a result of Deutsche Bank.
Right.
or the central bank itself, because the Federal Reserve is soon to be no longer, then
Okay.
what happens to your, I mean, you can't, do you move the trust in its
Well,
entirety?
wait, stop right there. You're not going to move the trust anywhere. You have, the trust document is within itself, and you have assets placed in a bank. If the banks go down, you're going to lose those assets. So what you want to do is you always want to have cash on hand, gold and silver maybe on hand, or whatever other valuable that you feel if the banks collapse, you would be able to sustain yourself. The trust is held in integrity. It's just the banking situation that has ripped all of us off. I don't want to go in it any more than that. So
I guess I'm lost, Randall, because I thought your asset is protected in a trust.
It is. It is,
Even
but
if the
it
bank,
is. But if you have liquid assets in the bank and the bank collapses, it's gone.
even if it's in the trust.
It doesn't matter what name it's in. If the bank collapses, it's gone. So carry cash on hand, some cash on hand. And, I'm not going into this doom and gloom. These guys from the mainland, I say, look, guys, I am not going to the place that everything's collapsing. I'm not going to go there. It may or it may not. Anything's possible, but nothing is probable. So that's what I stick to. Yes, we could all go to hell in a handbasket, but that has nothing to do with the trust. Your trust document is a sacred space to hold things. And if the banking system goes haywire, then it's the banks and the government that has allowed that to happen. It has nothing to do with the trust, and has nothing to do with you personally.
JB, the only thing that the trust protects is the title of ownership.
Right.
So like the wealthy have said, own nothing and control everything. So the title of ownership has shifted to the trust away from the individual. So any liabilities against the individual cannot get satisfaction from the trust.
Right.
But if those same assets are invested in something that disappears, the trust is not going to be able to restore what disappeared.
Exactly.
They had to guarantee you a one-to-one return because it's asset protected.
How can a trust guarantee anything? It can't. If it has anything to do with the bank, it's the bank that should be held responsible. That has nothing to do with the trust.
No, that's what I'm saying. The bank has to recover your asset if it's in a trust. If it collapses,
it would have to cover it if it's in trust or if it's in your own name. But whether it does that or not, we don't know. And I don't want to go to that negative process.
Well, it's just it's like preparing. It's not gloom and doom.
So put some gold and silver in your pocket. Put some liquefiable assets in your own in a safe place that's not in a bank.
Is there some other way one can? Why do you have to record the trust within the county? Aren't you under the?
Who's recording the trust? Wait, stop. Who's recording the trust in any county? Never have we indicated that you record the trust. Never.
I thought you said earlier it has to be recorded.
If you put real estate into the trust, the name change has to be recorded with the county, not the trust document.
Okay, all right. So just the name change, because I didn't think
just real estate. That's all.
Just the deed.
Yes.
To real estate. The deed.
Yes. Schedule B. Schedule A would be, let's say you have we obviously don't want to trust the banks totally, but I'm not going into that negative side. I'm going to say, okay, I'm going to hold some gold and silver. I'm going to hold some artwork. I'm going to hold some other asset that is outside the banking system. And then if it turns over, then there's a way to exist for a period of time. You know, and nothing, like I said, anything's possible and nothing is probable. So I just don't entertain. One is the trust does not get recorded anywhere. And two is always have a suitcase handy so that you can escape the fire.
Okay. I had a friend who recently was turned down by HSBC because they had an irrevocable trust. They won't deal with irrevocable trust. So in that situation, if you're governed by either HSBC or Wells Fargo, I guess you're just mandated to go to Wells Fargo. May I ask which bank your friends out there with you, what bank they selected with you? Because you went with them.
I didn't select anything. People go to whatever bank is available to them.
I'll bet if they had come with millions of dollars, the bank would have, HSBC would have been glad to accept them.
There's always the 13th floor. When you're a multimillionaire, you work in the private banking system, which is totally different than a public bank. The retail office is totally different than the 13th floor. So let's just leave it there.
Okay. If you're under no authority with these particular, as far as jurisdiction with this trust, how can it be sued? Who finds the name of the trust? Where do they get that information?
If somebody in the trust, the trustee, if it creates a liability, then the trust would be liable if it's within the trust. So you got to just leave it at that. The liability is on whoever created it, and the trust, because it's a contract between people, can sue, and it can be sued. Just get that.
Even though we've never heard of it happening to any of our clients.
No, because none of the clients have committed a liability, as far as I know. That's
3 or 4 decades of experience.
I just don't know how they find the name of the trust or the trustees.
It doesn't matter who's looking for it.
Well, that's why I don't know how they can be sued if they can't find the name of the trust.
Well, somebody's going to create a liability in order for there to be a liability. It's either going to be a trustee or a beneficiary. Then it can be sued. If the trust owns a piece of property and the trustees don't take care of it, somebody walks on the property and gets hurt, then whoever owns the property is going to be sued. And that would, in this case, be the trust.
But you've got a good point, JB. If they don't know that the trust exists, they may sue the trustee in his personal capacity, in which case they can't get anything because the assets are not in his name.
Right. If there's somebody falls down on a property, if the trust owns that piece of property and it didn't take insurance or it didn't keep the upkeep, then it would be liable.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for those.
You're welcome. Anybody else?
Thank you, JB. So, Abra, you had some more? Abra, did you have some more? You had your hand up again?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, hang on just a second. You caught me when I had a bite of something to eat.
That's okay.
Oh, hang on, let me turn to the page that I want to look at. So
you also had a comment in chat. Let's see, where was that? It is my understanding that we do not show the minutes to banks or anyone else.
The minutes are private.
that's
Correct.
what I thought. Okay.
I'm talking about the minutes. We're not talking about the indenture or the abstract.
Right.
Yeah, somebody was worried about the bank not accepting them because they didn't like the minutes where somebody got named. Like they shouldn't be seeing the minutes.
Nope.
Correct, Barbara. That's absolute.
All right. So Yeah, also under nature of trust, 5.1, it says it is not a business trust nor any other entity of statutory nature. So, but could you run a business with this trust?
Of course.
Okay, that's what I thought. I was just wanted to clarify that. Okay. You just don't like register it with anybody. It's private.
No.
Okay.
That's just a label. It's a statutory label.
You need labels. You need some way to make it all happen. But basically, it's not registered. It's not, and the minutes are private, and that's what's private. And if the banker wants to see the whole trust indenture, give them everything except say, I'm sorry, but the minutes are private. You can look at it. Here it is. I'll give you a copy of the indenture. I'll give you a copy of the abstract. But that's if you don't want to open an account with that information and what you have in front of you and me and my co-trustee, then we're going to walk around the corner and go somebody else.
Right.
Randall, in all my experience in 2-3 decades of using these, I've never been asked for the entire trust by a bank.
No. I was asked once, and I said, I left it. I said, you can read it. You can't copy it. And you can either say yay or nay. And they just, an hour later, they said, I'm sorry, we don't want to handle this thing. So I said, okay, fine. So I'll find somebody else, which I did. I have 2 accounts local, and I have a couple accounts on the mainland. I had to go to the mainland for my son's memorial, and I happened to find the right banker at the right time at the right place. And so I have accounts there, and I've had no problem in the last 5 years, 10 years, 30 years, sorry. I've been around a long time.
Lost count, huh? Okay, and in chat, Truby says there are insurance companies that will protect your money in a bank. JB, I think that comment is for you. These policies are normally set up for high net worth individuals. One like company is like Lloyd's of London.
Right, and then they're going to charge you a fee, percentage.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll cover your $1 million, and we'll charge you 2% of the total, or so much per month, or whatever.
Right.
Yeah, you can get insurance on anything, just how much you want to pay.
Yeah.
And we're all waiting for certain things to happen, and so we just have to hang in there. And it's either going to happen in our lifetime or it's not. I mean, I have people that badger me over the head. It's when, it's not if. So I'll just go with, okay, when it happens, it happens. In the meantime, gotta get up in the morning and put our pants on and get breakfast and do life.
Randall, you were talking about art as an asset. It reminds me of the funny story about an oil sheik and his wife who are billionaires, and they're in Paris shopping at the Louvre, and they purchased the original Mona Lisa for 50 million, and they purchased the original Van Gogh for 70 million. And he says to his wife, well, we've got the cards, now let's go get the gifts.
Yeah, exactly. All right. Amazing. It's a just different way of operating your life when you're you're either going from day to day, or you still need to produce results for people and clients, which I love to do. And but you have losses to take, and it happens.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, anybody else?
That seems to have addressed the questions for the moment. Did you want to comment on Charles Arthur and any news coming from them or their books?
I haven't heard anything. I got a comment, actually. Somebody asked me, he said he heard that Charles Arthur combated the IRS and won. And I have never heard that story from Passing the Buck people. So I have no idea Passing the Buck is a good book. It's like a reference book. So use it as a reference book. I have a bibliography. Tanzan can send it to you, or you can ask me for it, and it includes Passing the Buck. But it's just a reference book. I don't know what they do. I used to get a newsletter from them, but I haven't seen or heard from them for a period of time.
And for the benefit of everyone listening, if you haven't already, it is necessary to be a client of the trust with Randall, but Dominique is conducting the trust study group workshops every month, and you see those announcements in our newsletters. She's wonderful. She's one of the best proteges and students, and she is very kind and very studious and very devoted and very convinced, as well as convincing, because she has a statutory background.
Right.
She's been a creator and a manager of corporations. She's been an accountant. She understands computer software. She understands statutory law, and she understands common law, and she understands the difference and the advantages of common law. And natural law is just what we consider to be a more perfect version of common law. So she has been conducting the study group. She also provides the professional trustee services. And if anyone needs a nominee grantor, she provides that service. So for those of you who have not already, attend her monthly trust study groups if you're a client of the trust. And if you're not yet, then go ahead and become a client, and then you'll have access to her webinars. She is
Right.
doing one in December.
She's a perfect adjunct. I mean, it's perfect. So, get your stuff together and start the process with us. And then you have access to me, and you have access to Tanzan, and you have access to Dominique. And between the three of us, we'll fulfill the needs that you have as far as running and operating this trust that you've gotten from us. That's all we can do. And then you still have to do your life as you know it.
And thank you, Jaime. He put in chat, she is great. And thank you, Marianne. She put in chat, by the way, I highly enjoy the Trust's monthly studies with Dominique Hackett.
Great.
And then Aubrey also says Dominique's classes are great. And Jaime writes, what if you have not received abstract to open account at the bank?
If you're a client, you would have gotten it right away, unless you just came on board in the last week, which I've been slow. Anyway, you should have it. If you're a client,
all clients get the abstract, Jaime.
They should get it with it. I mean, I've been a little slow, granted, but they should have. If you're an older client, if you've been with us at least a month, then you should have the abstract. If you don't, then let us know. Something's askew.
Right.
Anybody else?
We are taking a break in December, huh, Randall?
Yeah, I got to take a break. I got to recover.
Yeah.
Hawaii's a beautiful place.
You want people to come visit you?
Sure. Cheer me up.
You've got a
say aloha.
You've got a beach resort there, yes?
I do. It's right out the window, right behind me. Sometimes I go behind the green screen. I think I did that one session, and everybody got a kick out of it. I said, oh, yeah, it's right here. And I went underneath. It was like going behind the magic, Dorothy going behind the magic screen.
Yes. I really enjoyed the dolphins when I was there, watching the dolphins.
Yeah, well, whale season's coming about. Dolphins are always here. The weather is spectacular now. There's been a spite in the rain. And yeah, come to Kauai.
Yeah.
You'll love it. You'll never forget it. It's a great place to come and relax or whatever you're doing. Or go anywhere. Go to the Caribbean. Just take a break and just appreciate what you have.
Yeah, and if you go there to talk to Randall about your trust, you can call it a business trip.
Absolutely.
Okay, thanks everyone. This is great. And there's a lot of thanks coming in, Randall, in the chat from
Thank you.
many people.
Thank you.
Yeah, yeah, a lot of thanks, a lot of nice comments about generosity and that we're great and all that. So thank you, everyone. This has been wonderful.
You bet. Thank you very much, everybody.
Okay, so next month, take a nice break, enjoy. You can certainly communicate with us through the website and our email addresses and so forth. In January, on the 22nd, we will reconvene for the next trust webinar. And everyone, please take care of yourselves and keep in touch.